Lesson 6, working with clips and markers. So we'll understand the differences between the program monitor and the source monitor, expanding a little bit on stuff that's covered in previous lessons. We'll play a 360 video for virtual reality headsets. We'll use markers. We'll apply sync locks and track locks. We'll select items in a sequence. We'll move clips in a sequence, and we'll also remove clips from a sequence, and we'll be able to see what happens as we go through and do those. So you're going to go ahead and open up the Lesson 6 project. It will end up looking something about like this. As you open it up, you may have to go in and find some content or locate the content. So once you have those open, what's going to happen here is we're going to go in and begin to work with this and understand a little bit more about what the program monitor is. We've all been viewing it, looking at stuff. We know that what things are in there, but we're going to look at what happens with it as we go through and start to deal with editing related to our program monitor. So we are in an editing workspace. As you start, you may want to go ahead and reset the saved layout just in case anything got changed, resized during previous times. As we go in and begin working with our program monitor. Now there's a lot of stuff in here that looks just like what we had inside of our source monitor. If we hit the tilde key just to the left of the one, with that we can go in and look at what do we have inside of here. So we'll isolate out this. So we see out in the center of our panel is the current sequence frame. So wherever our playhead is inside of our sequence, that's where it's going to be at. So based on the timeline panel as well. Over here in the lower right, we see the little wrench. Anytime we see our wrench, this is related to our settings. If we were to click on that, these are the different settings that are currently available to us. If there's a check mark next to it, it's currently enabled. So we go through and start to look. If you want to see rulers as you go to start to break down how many pixels for setups, you can go ahead and you can toggle that on as well. You can turn on show guides. So as you go in and begin to work with the items, set that up. Safe margins, so your action safe and title safe margins, if you want to see those. Again, if you toggle that on, you'll see the lines show up on there. Some people like to see those, some people don't like to see them. You can toggle those right back off. It's just important to note they're there in case you get on a machine where somebody has them enabled and you can't figure out how to turn those back off. We have our navigator down here. So that's this line here as we go through and start to look at how are we zoomed in. So as we bring that down, you'll start to see frame by frame. So that allows us to go in and adjust what it is that we are seeing on here. We come over here on these, any of them that you are concerned about, you can simply hover over and it will give you the tooltip. So here we have our comparison view, exporting frames, extractions, lifts. Go to the out point, step forward one frame, play, step back one frame, go to the in mark, mark in, mark an out, and then add a marker. And we'll work a little bit more with markers. Markers have some additional flexibility. Not only can we tag things as to identifying areas we may need to edit, but we can also use markers to place in still images. We want to put them at certain spots throughout. When we go through and you begin to work with it, what you're going to find is that you spend a lot of time over inside of the source monitor. It's the majority of where you're going to be doing all of your major selections and things like that. And we get into our program monitors where we're going to go through and fine tune a lot of what is there. Now we can actually go in and we can drag stuff from our source monitor into the project panel. In doing so, what's going to happen is we'll get a bunch of drop zones that are going to show up, or we'll call them as overlays. Those are areas as to what happens when you place it in there. You'll see the highlights with those. So when we start looking at those drop zones, we'll be able to view what exactly they are. So we come over here in our sequences bin. Over in the project area, there's the Theft Unexpected, not the Theft Unexpected 2 that's open. But let's go ahead and double click on the Theft Unexpected and open that up over inside of our timeline, and then also we'll see it up inside of the program monitor. Now if we come down here into our project panel, let's toggle open our theft unexpected. And down here we have this clip called HS Suit. So we're going to grab a hold of that and let's drag that up here and go over top of our program monitor. Now don't let go yet. As you come up over top of here, you're going to see the drop zones that appear in here. So as I drag these in, what do I want to do with it? Remember when we go through and we start looking at things dealing with insert before, it's looking at what clip is currently underneath that playhead. If we do insert after, again, it's looking at what one is underneath of that playhead. Replace, I was going to go through and work with that object there. We start looking at overwrite, it's going to go in and put it based upon where the playhead is at, is where it's going to start at. And it's going to go over it. If we do an insert, remember insert pushes everything over to the right. And then lastly, we have our overlay, which as you can see by the icon, it's going to go ahead and place this on the next track. So in this case, it should bounce it up to video 2 track. So as you bring it into here, decide where you want to put it at and just feel free to drop it. Watch and see what happens down here. So you can see where that clip goes in. So based upon where the playhead was, it automatically went ahead and dropped it in there. One track up on our video, so it'll play over everything else. You'll see then for the audio, put it on the next available audio track. Remember that video, we're only seeing what's on the highest track. Audio, it plays all of it. So once you place that in there, you can also undo. You can go ahead and grab all of this and drag up here. Look at insert before. Notice it goes in there and drops it at the very beginning of the sequence based upon where the playhead was at over top of the other item. And just, if you're unsure of what's going to happen with something, go in there and drop it in there and see what you get with it. So you'll see there I did after, so it was over the excuse me, it went ahead and placed it there. I come in here and do replace. Notice that it goes in there and replaces whatever clip that playhead is on. So you can go through, if you start thinking about what you want for areas, or you go in and you build stuff up, yeah, you could actually go in and mock up wireframe process, a layout for what you want to go in and work with, and go ahead and just simply by grabbing stuff, replace, and it'll go in there and it'll be the same length as what's there. So even image-wise, if you were doing something image-based and you wanted to go in like, oh, I really don't like that image, you can just grab the new image, go replace, and it'll automatically just take out that other one and drop that right in there, matching up with the time that's there. So go ahead, drag, drop, see what happens with those, see how each one functions. You should be familiar with the insert and overwrite. We've used those before. The new ones would be dealing with the overlay, replace, insert after, and insert before. And this is how you can quickly go ahead and drag those up into there. Once you've gone through and tested those, you'll want to go ahead and undo so it goes back so that nothing is left there. So nothing's been changed at this point. So we want to go ahead and we're going to end up bringing in this HS Suit clip that we've been working with. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and just take our playhead and move it over in the timeline so it's anywhere over the last clip. That's because we know at this point we're going to go ahead and we're going to use a placement for this, which is going to allow us to go in and adjust where it's at by dropping in a clip. So we're going to go in here. They had it around the 20-second mark is where they ended up at. So if we go to the 20-second mark, and we're going to go ahead and come over here to our HS Suit, and we're going to go ahead and double click on that. Remember, double clicking on an item inside of the project panel is going to open it up inside of our source monitor. So we're opening that source so we can go in and we can work with editing it. You will notice this source monitor does have the safe margins on. If you want to turn those off, you can go ahead and just simply come down there. The same wrench that we have on our program monitor, we also have over inside of the source monitor. So we're going to go in and we're going to choose a different part of this. You'll see that we already have set in points and out points. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to adjust it. Well, it's the in point sitting here, the out point appears in this case to be at the end of the clip. So we're going to go ahead and adjust our endpoint. So let's go ahead and come in here to 126.49. And we're going to go ahead and set our endpoint. Remember, a shortcut to set that endpoint is simply I. And then we only want 3 seconds of this. So we're going to take that to 126.52. We're going to set our out point by, once again, just using O as our shortcut key for it. So now we want to go ahead and we simply have the play head sitting inside of the last clip. We're going to go ahead and do ourselves an insert after with this. So what we can do is we can go anywhere inside the source monitor, we can click and we can just drag this across. We're going to come all the way over to the far right side where it says insert after, and we're going to go ahead and let go of that. You'll see it goes in there and drops it in after that clip. Now, since we have set our in point and our out point, when we go ahead and just click, grab that and drag it over, it's only going to take that section of it. So it's the intuitive setup that recognizes if you set an in point and out point, we're going to assume that you don't want the whole video, but that you want just this portion that you're currently working with. So that goes in and we can drop it right inside of there. Now down inside of our timeline, we can see down here we have this mid-suit shot over here, and we have a second mid-suit shot when it goes ahead and jumps back over to him. We're going to come in here to the second one, and we're going to go ahead and play through and see how our edits end up working. So we're at the 13-second mark. So it's at the beginning of that mid-suit. The other thing, remember, we can also use our arrow keys. So if you're trying to jump to the beginning of one, you can press the arrow keys, which is jumping between those edit points. And once we go in here, we're going to see how does this shot actually play. So we play it through, it moves over. Oops. And it snaps over to this next edit. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a simple adjustment here, and we're going to add something in, and we want to drop it in before that as it goes through to move between those two clips to help with the continuity between them. So just place the playhead somewhere over that mid-John. That's the one that comes after the mid-suit that starts at the 13-second mark. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add an in and out point over here to our HS suit clip that we have on here. And it can be any area that you want to go in and work with. So you may want to go in and see, okay, so he's there, he's reading his paper. So we want to add another clip that's going to come in here right before this. So let's see, what do we have? So there he comes in. There he sat down. So he's got the paper. And we're just kind of... I'm going to start somewhere right around here. So I'm at 127.42.19. I'm going to go ahead and set my new endpoint. Again, making sure that your source monitor is active. Blue line's not around that one. Then it's going to use the shortcut keys. So your endpoint, as you saw mine pop up momentarily there, went to the timeline, because even though I had moved the playhead and that, it didn't switch screens. Then I want 2 seconds. So all I'm going to do is come up here and change it to 127.44.19, just adding 2 seconds inside of the time code. And then I'm going to go ahead and set my out point. So now I have 2 seconds that it's there. And we're going to simply go ahead and we're going to click and drag this over. We're going to say insert before. So now we go through and look at what happens. Comes in there, he's sitting down. He's chewing, and he looks up. That's what I'm going with. You can have any of the video that you want to have in there, whichever you want it to go through and choose is fine. And then let's go ahead and bring this out here towards the end. So we're going to come out here to 25:20 mark. So this is just before John's going to take the pen out. And we're going to go into our mid-suit clip. So if we look at Theft Unexpected, we have the mid-suit. It's the bottom one over here. So we're going to go ahead and take that, double click, and open it up inside of our source monitor. So what we're going to do is, if we go in and we start to look at this, we're going to have him actually, using his pen. And that's at the 115.54 is where it is. So right now you'll see that the endpoint's set at 115.55. So we're just going to go ahead and back this up 1 second and set that as my new endpoint. And then we want just simply 2 seconds. So if we just go ahead and add 2 seconds there, we can set that as our out point. So as we start working with it, you're going to see that, yes, we can go through and we can play it, and we can like what we see and choose that just based on it. The other thing is, once we select something, if we know how much time we need in there, the quick thing is just go over there to the playhead then and add that time to it. And then go ahead and set your out point so that way we're working with just that content. So now that we have that set, remember down at the bottom of our source monitor, we have these 2 buttons. So this allows us to drag video only. This allows us to go in and drag audio only. Now remember, we go through, we start to think about what do these show us. Well, first off, it allows us to see if it has video, audio, or both. So as we look at that quickly, we can find that out. Certainly, of course, if you're seeing an image, you know that there's something related video-wise, but it doesn't mean that there's always going to be audio content attached with it. So we can go in and we can work with that. The other thing we can do is if we click on that, you'll see we can jump over and see what does the audio content look like. So that's our video content. If we click again, it's going to take us over to view the audio content. And the other thing we can do then, of course, if we click and drag on it, we drag just that piece over and into this. So we're going to go ahead and come down here into our timeline. Again, we're making sure we're at 2520. So down in this, we have 2520 for the playhead location inside of our timeline. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on our drag video only. And we're going to come over to here. And in this case, we want to go ahead and we're going to choose overlay. So as we go through to work with it, start to at least get an idea as to what we expect to happen or what should happen when we go in and drop this. So when I go in and put this, I should expect in this case to see video show up on video track 2, so V2. So as soon as I let go of that, you'll see it's up on there. So we have this cutaway that is going to play as we go through that transition then between those other 2 clips. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and save. And if we go back to home, we can go ahead and we can play, and you can see what you have so far. Let's get to the next part. Remember, it plays the uppermost video track. So there's the video. Let's do the edit, and then it comes back off of there. So if you need to adjust something, you can adjust what's there. If you don't like your clips, you can go in and add one, subtract one. Now, as we started working with these, remember we have playback resolution. As you start to look at your playback resolution, a lot of that's just going to depend on what we have for video content. How is it shot? What's the resolution of what you shot? Is it 60 frames a second, 24 frames a second? How is it rendering out? So it's not that you're going to come in here and automatically have to select one and say that's what I'm working with. But it does allow us to go in and adjust it. So over in our program monitor, down here in the lower right corner, this is our playback resolution in here. So we can go ahead and we can adjust and really see what's happening with this. So full playback means as it plays, it's going to be full resolution. By default, your machine should be set up to show stopped or paused resolution as full. So it should always be full. If you have a computer that's not running very quickly when it's going through to render stuff, especially in high action scenes, or if you have multiple layers going on where you have text or action going on like that, or if we add 3D effects, things along those lines, then you may want to step it down a little bit just to be able to go ahead and play it back as well. Let's go over to our project panel, and inside of here we have this Snow 3 layer in the Boston Snow bin. Let's go ahead and open that up inside of our source monitor. Now, when we open it up, you'll see it goes in and it's set here to half resolution. So when we go through and we play this using the space bar, it's going to go through and cut away from what's there. When you let go of it, you're going to see that you get a much sharper view because it's going to jump into that full resolution with it. If we go ahead and change this over to full and play it, you're not going to see any shift in play and pause content. Inversely, if we go ahead and we drop this down to 1/16 and you play it, now you can see it looks like we're kind of viewing it through some sort of glass window or something. So as we go through and play it, you can see there, especially just with even the copyright on there, what goes through and happens with it. As you go through and start to play this or start to work with it, the goal, of course, is to go in and choose what gives you the best representation of what it is that you're looking at. If you can get away with half, then play it on half. If you quarter works, play it on quarter. Obviously, if your machine has absolutely no issues running it at full, you can certainly go ahead and let it play at full as well. Now, if you want to go in and adjust the pause, once again, inside of our settings, so that's the wrench, you'll see playback. There we can go ahead and adjust it in here too. We also have then paused resolution. So right now this one on pause resolution is set to half. Typically when we go through and you start working with pause resolution, you're going to go ahead and set that to full. So that way you're able to see the exact content that's in there. Now at this half, if we play it, you can see just, again, slight differences in it, but not to the point to where that 1/16 where, again, it looked like, you know, we couldn't see because there was snow blowing inside of our faces. In the end, those settings have zero impact on the final exported video file. So it doesn't matter what it looks like in there. If you're previewing it on 1/16 and you go through and you export the media out, it doesn't impact at all what you choose ultimately as the codec, and the settings inside of the export media is going to determine what happens with the rest of it. Now inside of Premiere Pro, you can play back and also view VR video, so virtual reality video inside of there, and it has built-in support for 360 video and also 180-degree video for a VR headset display. So you can go in and begin to prepare items related to that. So if you do want to work in 3D, if you're shooting video with a 3D camera, you can edit that inside of here. So next thing we're looking at is using markers. So as we go through and we start to work with stuff, there's going to be times that you watch something and you're like, oh, I remember this part. And you want to be able to go back in and see or use that later on. It can be hard to remember exactly time-wise where it was at. So with that, we can go in and we can start to use markers. Now what happens with our markers, it allows us to go in and specify both in clips themselves and also even in sequences, areas that are of interest to us or areas that are important, and also allow us to even put comments on them. So as you watch something, go, oh yeah, I want to have this stuff, this shot earlier, it starts right here. You can hit a marker on that, and inside of a markers panel, we can go ahead and go in there and type in, you know, this is the opening of scene 1. You know, this clip for transition. So we can go in and we can add those into it. And we start looking at the markers. They are time-based, so they are temporal markers. What's nice though, like I said, is it will help you organize. It also can help you if you're working in a group to communicate to other group members as to what exactly is going on, what is the key to this area, or if there's a specific area that you need to get pulled, you can go ahead, you can flag that in there as you pass the file off to somebody else, because those files will, or those markers will stay inside of that file. So when we go in and look at markers, there's actually a few different types of markers. The first one would be a comment marker. So it's just a general marker. You can go in, you can assign some sort of name to it, duration, comments. It's, again, the most often used one because it is just a comment marker. Like, we need to edit this portion out, or there's an issue in this area, or video didn't render proper. So all of that stuff is possible in a comment marker. There's chapter markers. So if you're going in and working with something that's going to go out to some sort of optical disc, so DVD, Blu-rays, I mean, most stuff anymore is jumping to streaming, but there still are chapters. Even as you go through and start to stream movies, you can jump forward chapters, so we can do chapter markers as well. Segmentation markers, so this allows us to go in and divide video into parts. So that way you can go and you can set that up and export out just certain parts. Web links, so as we go through and put those in, depending on where we export it to, so depending on the video format it's going to go into, we can actually go ahead and tag these markers, which will automatically open up web pages as it hits those pieces. So if you got in there, you make a mention of a certain website that they can do something on, you can set up web markers in there as long as the video export that will handle it and allow it to work. Once the video plays, it gets that part, it'll pop up. So it's another location where if you have additional content you want them to access, you can talk about it. It will automatically open the website so they can actually click on links to get content that maybe is being discussed. And then flash cue points. This is actually a marker that's now used by Animate. Adobe Animate came in to replace what was Flash. So with Adobe Animate, it does allow us to go in and add these in. And then what's going to happen is as it goes through and plays, the animation and that we do with Animate will actually be able to play in those areas. So how do we go about working and adding in these markers? Let's go ahead and jump into our sequences. And inside of here, there's this city view sequence. So let's go ahead and double click on it, which is going to open it up inside of our timeline over here. And we can see up inside of our program monitor then the sequence called City Views. You may want to go ahead and play it quickly just to see what exactly is happening. So we have these videos in here. There's a period of time for them. They go through and play, and then it'll jump to the next one. I'm going to drag forward. So then we get into our clouds. And we jump into this other street, into night roads, into our sky view, and then back over to our waterfall. So as we go through and start to look at these are all designed and are in here for us to begin to work with. So let's go ahead and take this, and they're working right around the 112 mark. So we jump into here. This is where we have the night roads. And we want to make sure that we don't have any clips selected. So if we're highlighted like this, then that clip is selected. So we want to make sure that we don't have any clips selected in here. We can click anywhere on the background. Just make sure the highlights aren't on there. And we're going to go ahead and add ourselves a marker. Now there are multiple ways we can add a marker. Most of you are probably going to get to the point where you go in and you start to work with shortcut keys. So if we look at the top left of our timeline, right there we see add marker. We also see that we have in parentheses after that M being our shortcut key for our marker. So you can simply press M. The other thing you can also do is come out here to our timeline ruler. You can right click on it and you'll see add marker. Now one other thing that's available to us as we go and look inside of the right click in our secondary menu is that we also have the ability to go to next marker and go to previous marker. So as you go and you start to navigate the timeline, the sequence, we could jump marker marker to marker, back to the previous marker. So as you're going through to work with those, add comments and stuff like that, you can go ahead and bounce around pretty easily for them. So in this case, when we go through to add a marker, this is most often, of course, used as simply a comment marker. If you look a little bit lower down on the list, you'll see that down here we have the ability to add our chapter marker and also to add flash cue marker. So we do have that ability to work with those. So whichever method you want to use, let's go ahead and let's add a marker where we were currently at that 112 mark. So now that we've gone in and added a marker, if we go up to the top of our screen and we go up here to window, make sure we have markers available. And then we need to come down here. It's nested over inside with our project. You'll see markers. So if we click on that, there's our first marker. Now as we go through and work with markers, they do have an in and out, and that's just letting us know what are we looking at. So if you're going in there and saying, hey, we need to remove this area, you can set an in point. So at 112, needs to start the removal. At 113.04, we need to end the removal. We'll allow you to go in and quickly decide where it is that you want to make those edits at. So we can go in, we can work with what we have inside of here for the markers. Now if you go ahead and you double click on the marker, what you're going to see then is this is the little dialog box that comes up related to our markers. This allows us to go in and do various things. First off, we can name the marker. So if you want to give the marker a specific name, you can do that. So we can go ahead and we can come up here where it says name, insertion points there flashing, and we can go ahead and say replace this shot. So we don't like what we have on here. On our duration, how much of it do we want to go in and replace? Well, we've decided that there's about 4 seconds here that we want to get rid of. So we're going to go ahead and hit 400. And if I hit tab, it'll jump back up to the other box. Now, if we have comments, you can make those inside of here too. We need to remove this shot because Billy dropped the camera. So anything you want to put in here, you can put in there. The other things we have down here are marker colors. So you do have the ability to go in and change what color it is that you're using. You can change the style. So if you started as a comment marker and you actually wanted a web link, you can do that and put the URL inside of there. If you need to switch it to a chapter marker, you can do that in there as well. Once you're happy with what's inside of there, we go ahead and we click OK. What you'll find then is inside of our timeline, there it is. When you hover over it, you see it says replace this shot. You'll see that the span there, so it takes that marker and splits it in two and actually pulls out half of it. That's the span of it. So it's going from the, essentially, if you think about the in and the out points, that's what we're looking at. In point as to where we want to get rid of that, out point where we are going to stop at. But this doesn't function as in and out points with them inside of there at the moment. So if you go through and you start to look at what's all available inside of your marker. So if we go up to the top of our screen, we have our markers panel. And we start to see what are the options that are available to us. So with that, you'll see in and out marks. You can see mark clips. There's where you see add marker. We can clear selected marker. So if we're on one, we can clear that one. We can clear all the markers. So you put markers in for something. Maybe you're going in to do a sequence. And you're in there and you're just adding it because you're planning to put a bunch of still images in and then you don't really like the way it worked out. This is a quick way that you can go in if you do like a wedding video and you have the music playing and you want to play it, make the change at certain parts. We can add markers to it and then we can automate the markers to the sequences. But what you'll see down towards the bottom is ripple sequence markers. So when this is enabled, meaning there's a check mark next to it, markers are actually going to move in sync with the clips when you insert or extract clips. If you uncheck that, it's going to be disabled. So the key thing with that as we go through and start to work with it is that we need to know if you put a marker in and then you go and you make an edit before it that goes in and pushes an edit over, that marker will stay put if you don't have turned on the ripple sequence markers. So I would highly recommend just leaving it turned on. So we can go through and we can set that up. The other thing you'll see down here too is the ability to copy and paste includes sequence markers. So with this enabled, what's going to happen is when you copy any section of a sequence, so if we go in here, we set in and out points, and we copy a section of the sequence, when we actually go in and we paste it somewhere else, that marker is going to travel with it. So that's advantageous if you have certain things that you know you need to take out, or parts you need to take out, or highlight certain areas. You can go ahead and create those markers, and then when you have this turned on, right now it's not, but if we go and we turn that on, you'll see then when we look at this is that with the check mark next to it, now it's going to copy those. I would recommend just turning both those on and keeping those on, and turning them off for the rare instances in which you don't want it to occur. So some examples of where you might not want it to occur. If you're doing edits and you're setting in there and you're marking certain areas of music, and you know that you're gonna, those are there when you go in and add in clips, you don't want those markers continuing to move around. That's gonna stick and stay with that music setup. So that's how we can go in and we can start to work with markers. If you want to see what happens with them, you can turn off ripple sequence markers and you can drag and drop something in here. And you'll see that that replace shot stayed put. If I undo that real quick, once again, come in here and turn that back on. Drag this in here and just drop it. You'll see now that that marker moves over and sticks with the playhead. So with that, I would encourage, like I said, leaving both those just toggled on, so check mark next to them. Now we go and we start working with clips. We can add markers then to individual clips as well. So let's jump back into our project panel again. And inside of our further media bin, if we toggle it open, we have this Seattle skyline movie. So I'm going to double click on that and open that up inside of my source monitor. Now I see that I have my blue line going around the outside of my source monitor, meaning that is my active area. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the space bar to start playing this. And as it plays, I'm just going to start hitting M at like random times. Because remember, M is our shortcut. So I'm just going to go in here and hit M a few times. And then once you're happy with how many markers you have in there, and there's no set number you need to have, go ahead and pull back up the markers panel once again. So every marker now that we've gone in and added, we can see inside of here. So maybe you're adding them consistently. Like my first one's 108, second one's 216. So as you go through and start to put those in, what are you doing with them? How do they look? Everything is inside of there. Now if we go through and we add part of this clip to a sequence, any of the markers that exist inside of my in and out point or in the whole clip in general will actually be placed and stay with this. So if I were to take this and bring this in here and do insert, notice as we look on our timeline, there are the markers. So they're down there because those are clip markers. Those are markers that were added to a clip. The clip was placed inside of here, so once we place it in here, they will actually be able to be seen inside of that clip. So if I pull that clip back up later on, those markers are going to be in the exact same area. So if we make sure that this is active up here, we can also go ahead and we can clear all these markers as well. So if we go ahead and right click on it, you'll see here we have clear all markers. The other option we have is we can come up to the top here, we can say markers, clear all markers. Or you'll see we can also come out here and go Command Option M, which will also clear all of the markers. The clear all markers, eventually, if you're using a lot of markers, the shortcut key will go back to memory. Other than that, most of the time, you're probably going to right click to the secondary menu. Secondary menu comes up, you're going to choose clear all markers. So that allows us to go in and change what is there. I'm going to hit save just out of habit. We go through and we start to work with. You can also export markers that are associated with any clip or sequence as a text file. So if you put a bunch of markers in there and you're trying to understand what they all are instead of looking necessarily in the markers all the time, we can go ahead and we can export that out. It can be text. You can also do it as an HTML page with thumbnails, or you can of course do it as a comma separated value, so CSV file that you can open up inside of spreadsheet stuff, whether it's numbers on an Apple or whether you're using Excel inside of Microsoft. So to do export markers, what we're going to end up coming up here and doing is we just go in here to File, Export. And then right there's markers. We don't have any markers currently on this, but we can go through and we can choose that, and then inside of there we can choose the file from it. And then you can use that as a checklist. If you're going through and working on certain things, you can do that as well. Or of course, once you complete something that's dealing with replaces, we can go ahead and just delete the marker from the individual file. Now inside of this, as we start working, we're going to have a bunch of clips in here. As you start to work with longer and longer and longer video projects, you're going to find that you have a bunch of clips added and you may need to navigate through and find certain things. So what we can do is we can come up here to our Edit Find. Right there, or we can go Command F. So if I come out here and activate this, go Command F, we're going to see this Find in Timeline pop up. What's going to happen with that as we come in here and begin to work with it? What are we doing? We're looking at searching for a name that contains what? And a name that contains what? So when we go through and we start to look at what we're adding in here, what are we trying to do with this? So if I hit excuse, this is going to allow us to go in there and it's going to look for all the clips that actually have just that in there. So I can say find. It's going to go in there. Let me jump over to this one. So once again, Command F, excuse, find. You'll see it goes in there. It's going to find the first instance. Notice that we see the highlight going around the outside of that. It's going to let me know that that's where that file is at. The other thing we can do is we come in here with this and we say find all. Now you're going to notice anywhere that is at, it's going to go through and select it. So it recognizes in this case there's 3 different instances of that on the video track, and there are 2 instances of it in the audio track. If you have additional things you want to look for, there is the and feature. So excuse and if we have something else on there, so we're looking for excuse and suit. Find. It's not finding anything because in this case it's looking that it has both of those, so an excuse and a suit in there. If we have that same search and we change it from and to or, and we say find all, now notice how many other things get selected inside of there. So as you go through to select that, look at what it is you're looking for. If you can, of course, be more concrete with it, specific with the and feature, it's going to limit out some of the extraneous ones. This also allows us to go through and look at a bunch of different setups for them. Now we go and we start to work with our sync lock. So when we come in here, these right here are our syncs. So these are the sync locks. So if we go ahead and toggle that, what's going to happen with that is going to allow us to work into it from change standpoint. So as we go in to bring things in, it's locking in audio and video to one another. If you don't want anything on an entire actual track, we want to toggle on the lock down here. That's a track lock, which won't allow us to go through and do any edits that are on there. So if we have sync lock on, it's going to go ahead and it's going to shift them together. So it's going to help keep the tracks all synchronized. If we turn it off, it's going to allow them to move around. If you have something specific on a track and you don't want it to get messed up, track lock it. You don't have to worry about it. Anything you drag in there, drop in there, it's going to go ahead and going to always go on a different level for the video. So let's jump over to the Theft Unexpected 02. going to look like this. And we're going to go in and begin to work with this. So there's actually 2 takes of him showing up and where he says, "Excuse me," that are inside of here that we'll go through and fix. So when he begins, the audience doesn't actually know what he's looking at. So let's add ourselves a new opening shot. So let's go into our project panel and let's open our mid-suit clip. So we're going to go back into our Theft Unexpected. We're going to open up our mid-suit. It may already be open. And inside of here, we want to go ahead and set ourselves up an endpoint. So let's move this up here. It's in the 135, 18 range. Let's go ahead and set that as our endpoint. Again, shortcut is I. And then with this, we want 115.39. Don't forget you can use your arrow keys. Right arrow key to move forward 1 frame, left arrow key to move back 1 frame. Quick way to be able to go through there and simply click, click, click until you get something as it moves into position. You figure out exactly the position you like, and then we go ahead and set our point there. So we're going to go ahead and move that over to 115.39. And let's go ahead and hit O to set our out point. So now we have an in point and our out point. Want to make sure your timeline's at the very beginning, or your playhead's at the very beginning of it. So the time code inside of your sequence should be all zeros. Then once we have that in there, we're making sure there shouldn't be any in or out points on the timeline, because we're going to be looking at whether we're doing a 3-point or a 4-point edit. The fact they're already on here, we now can go ahead and let's turn off the sync lock on track 2. So all we're going to do is come in here to track 2. We're going to click on the sync lock, / going through it, so that we've turned off the sync lock for track number 2. We also want to make sure then that we're targeting video 1, audio 1. So video 1, audio 1, that's where these things should ultimately be going to. And you start to look at where all of your clips are currently at inside of here. So let's go ahead and do an insert edit with this. So we're at the very beginning. Let's go ahead and hit it with an insert edit. So I'm just going to click on the insert edit button inside of my source monitor. And what do we see happening with that? See what's going on with that? So when we talk about the cutaway clip, we're talking about is this one right here. When we go in there, since we have the track toggle sync lock off for this track V2, when we go and we add something inside of here, that doesn't move. So when we go in and put that in there, that does not move. So you'll see as we push that, notice it sits in the same spot. So when we turn off that track sync lock, when you go through, if you're using multiple tracks, you need to make sure that's on. Otherwise, if like you had title blocks and stuff like that, when we add content before on there, that's not going to move with it. So then all of a sudden your title is going to show up in a goofy spot, not in the location that you want it. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that, and let's toggle the sync lock back on. Let's do that same edit. And watch how that moves over with everything else. So that's our power as we go through and we start to work with our locks. Now we go and we start looking at track locks. They are completely separate from our sync locks. These straight up just don't allow us to do anything on an entire track. So as soon as I do that, notice how we get the hashing going through there. That's on there, just indicate that nothing can go on there, nothing can be changed related to what is there. So now if we try to go in and add something to this, it's not going to allow that to move anywhere. So keep that in mind as you go through and start to work. If I come in here, do an insert edit, you'll see it's error based upon the fact that it's not going to allow me to move or put anything into there. So as we go through and we start to work with it, we can lock that up, which is going to keep us from being able to add anything into there or mess up what is there. Now, as you go through, you start working inside of your sequence, and you start adding things, start deleting things. There's a possibility that you might end up with gaps. Sometimes the gaps are large. Sometimes you just simply gap one frame. So as we start to work with those, we need to start to think about those, and we need to go through and figure out how can we actually remove them from there. So as we remove clips, like I said, you're going to either, if we go through and we create a lift, it's going to create a gap. If we do an extract, it's not. So keep that in mind. If we go through and we do an extract, it's automatically going to essentially ripple delete any gap that gets created. If we go through and we simply do a lift, then it's going to leave that gap in behind there. So as we start to think about those, you can think about, essentially extract is similar to an insert, but reverse. So an insert, we drops it in there, automatically moves everything over to the right. When we do that extract, what's going to happen is we extract it, and then everything moves over to the left to actually fill in the void that was created. As you go and you start to work with different sequences, we are able to go to anywhere that there's a gap inside of there. So up at the top, we have our sequence. Then inside of here, we actually have the ability to do go to gap. So see down here, go to gap, next in sequence. When you click on that, it's going to go ahead and it's going to look and move to the next gap if there's a gap inside of that sequence. In this case, there isn't one right now, so it, of course, doesn't move up to it. Now, we do go in and we find ourselves a gap between those. The other option we have inside of that sequence is close gap. By going in and selecting this, it will go in and remove it. Once you go through and find a gap, you can also click on the gap. The gap will select just like anything else, and we can go ahead and delete, and it'll close it and essentially do a ripple delete. So it'll slide everything else back over to it. As you go through and start working with clips, selecting clips, remember that they are linked to outside files. So when we go through and add something to the sequence, make sure we keep track of what is there. The other thing, as we go through and start to work, you'll see down here, we have our linked selection. So as we go through and we start looking at this button, what's going to happen here is it's looking at links between clips. So any links that are inside of there, we start looking at audio, and that if we go through, if we turn that off, we come down and we start clicking on things. Notice that it's not automatically selecting the audio file that's underneath of it. So if you want to be working just with the videos or just with the audio, we need to go ahead and we can toggle that on. If we toggle that back off, you'll see when you go in and you click on video, it's going to automatically select any audio that is associated with it that's linked to it that goes out to that same file that we had before. Now you can toggle that on and off. I don't toggle that on and off because if you simply hold down Option when you come in here and you click on one area, it will allow you to isolate it. So if I only want the video portion, I can hold down Option, click on the video, it'll select the video. If I only want the audio, same type of thing. Hold down Option, click on the audio, it's only going to select the audio. So maybe you drop something in here and you have the audio track. You're not going to use any of the audio track, but it still brought it in. You can go ahead and you can just simply click on that, hit delete, and it will disappear as well. We go there and we start selecting clips that are in a sequence. There's two ways we can do it. We can go ahead and we can do in and out points, or we can also just do clip segment selections inside of there. So the easiest way to, of course, select a clip is to go ahead and click on it. We also have the ability to do a box select. So if we are selecting a bunch of stuff, we can do that. If we want to come in here and select multiple areas and we only want the audio or video portion of it, if you hold down Option while you do the box select, it will go through and select each one of them. So you can drag around. You can also click, hold down Shift. That'll allow you to select multiples as well. So Shift is going to allow you to add to what is there. If we have a clip that's sitting underneath of our timeline, you can simply press D. So if you're in a location, this is where you're at, you want to do something to this, notice if you go ahead and just move the playhead over any of those clips, hit D, and you'll see that it goes through and selects them. and it will select both the audio and video if they are together, because we of course have it set up in the timeline to do so. We can also go through and we can start to select all of the items on a track. You'll see here is we have our track select forward tool and our track select backwards tool. So when we come in here and look at those, we see A or Shift A as the shortcuts for that. So if I say track select forward, you'll see if I click, it's going to automatically select all the tracks beyond that, wherever I click at. If I go ahead and change that over to track select backwards, when I click on there, it's going to take anything and all the stuff that falls before it. So a quick way to select a bunch of different things. Maybe you want to select all of these and you're going to go ahead and just nudge them over a little bit or move them over a little bit. It's a quick way to select it. Make sure you're selecting everything beyond that. And you'll see it does go through and select them regardless of what track they are on. So this is selecting everything. You know, like I said, if you were in here for this and you decided that you needed to move all of these over, we can go ahead and we can do that. You'll see now they're all selected. We can move them over a certain part, and then we can go ahead and we can work with the space that is there. Notice when I went down, since I went and created a gap, I can just show you that if we go in there and we do that, go to next gap, notice it jumped over to the start of what is there. So now we have this gap that is inside of here. This, we can come up here and we can say close gap. Notice it automatically goes in and closes out what is with that. Getting used to how you can select stuff and move stuff around will, of course, speed up the editing process. Anytime we can make things happen at a better pace for us, working smarter, not harder, is of course beneficial to us. So look at how you can use some of the different tools for the individual selections. Now what happens if we have a clip and we want to go in and split that clip? Well, inside of our tools, we also have our razor tool. Shortcut for that is C. So what's going to happen with that is we come out here and we go over top of a clip. Notice that we get this line on there. That line is going to indicate where exactly are we going to go in and cut this. So if I click, notice it goes through and it cuts the two of those. Or cuts that into two. If I move over here to where we have this one, if I want to go through all of the clips, I'm going to add in the shift key. So hold down shift with that. Notice the line now goes through everything. If I click somewhere, it's going to go through and slice all of them. So that's how we can go through and begin to work with that. The other thing we also can do is when we go through and we place our playhead in the timeline, we can go up into the sequence menu and do add edit, and notice it slices through them too. The shortcut for that is Command K. So if you're moving it over there and you don't want to keep switching tools, but you know you need to cut that right there, Command K is the shortcut to do so. The same thing if we're over here dealing with tracks and we're sitting there and we have stuff on multiple video audios, we can also go ahead and in the side of the sequence we can add and edit to all tracks. So it's going to do the same thing as slicing through all of them by holding down shift with the razor. Once again, start working on committing as much of this to memory as possible so we can work more efficiently as we go through and use it. So we can look at edits as we go through and we start to work with edits. What happens when we go through and we slice things? So we've sliced all the way through, but then we decide we don't change anything on that. So we have those playthrough edits that exist inside of there. Well, inside of our timeline, we have a wrench down here as well. So these are all the options that we want to go ahead and see. In the middle of this, we see show through edits. Now what that's going to do is that's going to indicate to us where there are edits that simply are play through edits. What is that? So if we come in here and we take this and we hit Command K, so all we've done is we've sliced this. What you're going to see on here is you're going to see those triangles. What that's indicating to you is that this is a play through edit or a follow through edit that's going to go ahead, and what's happening with it is the clip or the frame right before that split and the frame after it are frames that follow each other inside of the edit. They're matched up. We haven't done anything to this clip to change that. So we know that they're still in sequence when we start looking at those edits. So that's there just to know that that's what's going on with that. It's a visual cue for it. If you want that, that's fine. You can leave those on there. If you don't want them, you don't have to have them on there. If we come in and we start to look at what we have for our edit, we have those individual pieces that are there, and it's not letting me select the through edit. You should be able to come in here and actually select your through edit and then delete the options that are inside of there, and that will join the two clips together. So that allows us to go in and we can see what we have for through edits in there. Now as we go through and we start to work with the clips, we may also want to go ahead and group clips. So inside of our sequence, if you grab multiple clips inside of here, and then if we go ahead and right click on that, we can go ahead and we can group them. So right here we have group. So now when we come in and we click on any individual clip, you're going to notice it selects all of them. So as you go through and you start to work with them, know that they're going to be working together as a group. And then moving clips. How can we go in here and move these? Well, if I come in here and I decide I want to create a space here, I can actually just select them and just drag them to the right or left. If I drag to the left and I let go, what do you think is going to happen? That stuff that they're being dropped over is going to disappear. So we move those to the right. If you move down, notice I was clicked on it and dragging around. When I'm down on the audio side, if I drag down, notice it automatically will move them down to the next track. If I go up, it's going to move stuff to the next video track. Once you're happy with the placement, you can go ahead and you can let go of it, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to introduce this gap that's inside of here. Now we talked about going and finding a gap and doing close gap. The other thing we can do is we can come up there, we can just click again on the gap, hit delete, and notice that it automatically goes in and does a ripple delete and moves those items over to it. As we go through and move things, if you want it to snap, so you'll see it's going to start snapping to certain areas and that as we move, that's enabled right up here by Snap in Timeline. So it does allow this to go in there. You'll see it starting to work. Plus, if I go ahead and say, well, I want this to be right at 45 seconds. So there it is. I can grab this when I get it over there. Notice it snaps to it. If you look at the top and bottom of the timeline line that goes on there, you'll see the triangles there, indicating that that is actually against that, and that'll allow it to go ahead and snap into that location. So we can go through and do placement. If you don't have that turned on, then it's not going to snap, so it's not going to be magnetic. If we go ahead and we select clips, we can go ahead and we can work on nudging our clip. So if I have this set somewhere and I want to move it over, we can actually go ahead and we can nudge them one frame at a time. So if I hold down Command and push to the left, notice that you can see the clip moving to the left. If I keep Command down and push to the right, it's going to nudge that to the right. If we go ahead and we add in Shift, now it's going to move 5 frames at a time. You can see where that's moving. And if you look at the lower right of your program monitor, that's the duration. You'll see as I move that to the left, that's going to drop down 5 frames at a time. If I let go of Shift, you'll notice it goes 1 frame at a time. That's just because what I have as my current selection is the last clips that are going to play on the timeline. So therefore, it's the end of it. So you can see 1 versus 5. So that's how you can go ahead and you can nudge those, adjust where they're at. Then if you wanted to, like if you were filling content, say on your PSA, go in there, you have 5 seconds, you nudge it around, get it right to the right timeline, and you get that gap. You can go ahead then and put an in point, out point, and you can drop and edit right inside of that gap to fill up exactly what you have and you need. Now we can move stuff around inside of here as well. So we can go through and move different items. So let's go in and look at using our HS suit in there. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of, delete that gap that I went in there and created. So we have the HS suit shot. Let's go ahead and make this a little larger so we can see what's going on in here. So the HS suit is right around 16 in here. So we see here it says HS suit. So I can see it starting with that. So it's right around the 16-second mark. That's where we're going to be at. And we're going to go ahead and work with some of the continuity that's in here. So we make sure our snapping is enabled. And we want to drag our HS suit clip over to the left to match up with or make the left edge of it match up with what is there. So we can go ahead and we can move this. Oh, I had those grouped. So let's go ahead and ungroup. But you can see we can grab a hold of this. We can start to move clips. So if we move that over to the left, you're going to see if we drop that in there, what happens with it. What we can also do with that is we can drag this over and we can hold down Command. Now you'll see that what we're getting up here are the individual arrows that are showing up, allowing us to go in and decide what's going to happen to that. So when we go ahead and we bring it over and we let go, notice it goes in there and it creates us a gap. Now depending on which one that it is you're grabbing and you're moving, so we have this other mid-suit one here, same type of thing can happen with it. So if I grab a hold of it, begin to move it, hold this down, we can drop it in there. Notice where we get an additional gap that shows up. So this is one way we can go in and we can begin to add in items that are there. In this case, using the command. Notice it goes in, it essentially picks it up, moves it over, and we drop it in, it slides everything else over. Where we took that piece out, it leaves that slot open so the rest of the stuff still actually goes in there and matches up with each other. Now we can copy any clip if we want to. We can paste clips in to it as well. So if we go out here and we decide on a clip that we want to have, we can go ahead and we can take this clip and we can hit Command C, which is going to allow us to copy it, move our playhead to where we want it to be at, and then hit Command V. Notice that it goes in there, and we'll place that in. What type of edit did it place in there? So it's actually going in there and it's doing an overwrite. As you'll see, it goes in there. So where it started over, and then you'll see it'll pick up the other clip after that. So just be aware of it as you go in there and you place that in, what's going to happen with what is there. If you want to go through and do it as an insert, so if I undo that and we want to go ahead and do that as an insert, just add in Shift. So Command Shift V, and then it's going to paste it as an insert. So it's going to drop it in there and essentially make the edit line, and then it's going to push it over to the right. Now, the other thing we can do is we go through and we start working on our edits. As we remember, we talked about a lift and an extract edit. So if we come down here, we have this excuse me tilted that is over here. If we go ahead and we select that, we're going to go ahead and we want to remove it. So inside of our program monitor, what you're going to see up here is we have the ability to do a lift. We also have the ability to do an extract. So if we're over here and we're looking at this, what do we want to go in here and do with this? Well, if I go ahead and take this and lift this out, then what's going to end up happening with that is it's going to leave us a spot. So if I'm, come on. So if I delete that, notice that it goes through and works the same way as if we were to go in and do an extract on it. We can also go in with this, and based upon what we have set here for this, is we can go ahead and we can set an in point, and we can set ourselves an out point on this, and we can do the same thing then using our program monitor. So even though we had something selected in the timeline, we can't use the lift out of here because we have to go in and create an in and an out point before the program monitor is going to allow us to lift what's there. So we just lifted that out of there, leaving a gap. If I jump over here to this other edit, again, I'm setting in and out points using my arrow keys, so it allows me to go to the point that I want to be at. If I come in here and I go ahead and I choose extract, notice that as it comes out, it's going to close itself back down. As you start to work with them, it's important to just understand what it is that you're trying to do with them. Why do you want to do what you're doing? Why are you removing something that is there? We can also come in, we can select individual items, and we can simply hit the delete key. Notice that when we do that, that is simply a delete. If we come through here and we work with a different area and we want to go ahead and make that disappear, we need to use shift and the forward delete. Now, not all of your keyboards are going to have a forward delete. That's the delete key that is just to the left of the end key on your keyboard. So if you're using a keyboard that has the expanded functions like that, you will be able to go ahead and hold down shift, hit that forward delete, and it will create then a ripple delete. So it makes the delete and it automatically allows them to fold back on it. The last thing with it is if we have any clips that we're working with and we want to go in and disable what we have for our clip, then we can go ahead and we can do that as well. So we can go ahead and we can right click on our clip, and here we see enable. If you undo that, that makes it be disabled. And that means it's just not going to show up inside of here as we go through and begin to use it. So it's no longer able to be seen. So we right click on it, click back on enable, so we have the check mark next to it, and then we'll be able to see what is there. So as you go and you start working with your clips, start thinking about other ways you can make them function. Be aware of what happens when we do the different techniques. Decide whatever it is you want to use to start with. If you go through and you start deleting and leave it without ripple delete, at least then you're going to see the gaps that remain. And if you don't want those gaps to be in there, we can quickly go in and clear those individual gaps. But that's working with clips and markers. However much you want to use markers is really up to you. However much you want to go in and the methods you want to use as you go in to work with the clips is also just your personal preference and what you put together for a workflow. But as you can see, Premiere Pro is really powerful when it comes to working with clips and what exactly we can do with them.